Thank you, Madam Toastmaster. I first became enamored of French when I took a course in between jobs in 1982 over at Hartnell. Ever since then, I swore at that time one day I would go to France. Since that time, I've been flirting with the language off and on. I've been to France 6 times. And every time I get ready to go to France, I start getting more intense about practicing my French. So it was a strange coincidence in the summer of 2018 when one of my neighbors came passing by and let us know that she was holding a party on the evening after the annual Spreckles Town Garage Sale. So I went down there and we were schmoozing with some of our neighbors. And oddly enough, the first coincidence comes in. Not only did this lady belong to a French club that meets in Salinas once a month in somebody's house, they jump from house to house every year. She was also a tango aficionado, and she and her husband hosted tango parties right down the street from my house. And they happened to have entertained several times as a guest my best friend, also a tango instructor, my acupuncturist, and my travel companion who's been to France with me twice, Lynn, who had been to this lady's house down the street from me even before I ever met her. So that was one coincidence. The following month, I attended my first meeting of the French club in Salinas. I was totally intimidated. I've always been a little bit better at reading and understanding French than I have at speaking and hearing it. And so I mostly sat on the sides and listened and smiled and made a few responses. And I was so intimidated that it was almost a year, it was a little over a year and a half before the next time I went. My next attendant was in February of 2020, just before the lockdown. So I went again. And then as the lockdown clamped on us, it dawned on me, well, here we are in Toastmasters and we're doing all of this online meeting with Zoom. What would you think if I helped the French club migrate into Zoom? So I approached the leader of the club, and there were a few difficulties involved because nobody shared their email addresses except with the leader of the club, a lady named Céline. Everybody was kind of reticent about sharing that stuff, so she would pass the meeting notices around from her mailing list and blind CC everybody else. So I said, look, we have this opportunity and we can get everybody meeting online. What do you think about that? And so I set up a meeting. I didn't yet have a Zoom account. So all I had was 40 minutes available to try our first meeting. So we did that, we set it up. There are a number of older people in the club who are not very computer savvy. So I spent some time on the phone ahead of time trying to help these people get Zoom installed on computers. One of these older people actually happens to be the sister of the well-known California legislator, Bill Monning. But our first meeting was a bit of a disaster. None of the Zoom, volume levels and getting people to use the microphones, and plus being stuck with only 40 minutes to get all of that resolved, we didn't get a whole lot of French speaking done that day. But then I had another brainstorm. Well, if we're not having to cope with going and traveling, why not meet every Saturday instead of just once a month? Everybody gets more experience, they get more hours, and they have the advantage of getting to do this all the time instead of just once a month. So I spent the next couple of weeks working some more with people online, getting the Zoom issues all rounded up, getting everything nicely organized. And we eventually ended up with about 6 or 7 people that come every week. So our format eventually evolved into, we'd open up with general conversation, small one-on-one and one-to-many conversations. We have, well, the leader of the group is Céline. She's a French Canadian, so she speaks French natively. There's another man by the name of Christian, who happens to be, among other things, very fluent in French. He's an artist and very comedic. Yes, comedic is the word. And so he opens up after the general conversation with some cartoons that illustrate interesting puns. Then he'll pose 10 or 11 questions en français so that we can struggle with finding the answers to those. Then we switch over to my 2 parts in the meeting. The first one is I keep a spreadsheet of French idioms. So I'll have the phrase in français, manger sucer les pissenlits par la racine, which is basically to be dead. Literally, it means to eat or suck the dandelions by the root. And then I'll proceed to the other part. Somehow I got connected with Quora, which is a question and answer website, the French version. Now, why is it sharing? That's not what it, no, that's what I want. That's what I, there we go. And I'll choose 5 or 6 questions from the weekly journals that I get from them. We can read and then translate. And if we find any issues with difficulties with translation, I can go right over to Google Translate. And get the translation. And so we spend about an hour and a half every week working through these. And so the club has successfully transitioned into online meetings. And herein comes one of the other very odd coincidences. You know how we all love strange coincidences and how things just come into play where different parts of our world collide. Well, all along the way, I got a phone call from Céline, the manager of the group, and the caller ID on her phone number said Céline Dalby. A very curious coincidence because Dalby happened to be the name of my boss's boss at the county before I retired, Dave Dalby. He was the head of the communications division of information technology. Turns out that's her husband. So, quelle coincidence, what a strange coincidence, but that's how life works. All in all, I have hopes over the next year that the pandemic restrictions will recede and I will be able to visit France again with my travel buddy. Madam Toastmaster.
Thank